the big value add of CSDD is two things. One, it essentially, due diligence is already referenced in many EU legislation. So if you're an asset manager under SFDR, you have to have a due diligence policy. Even under NFRD, you have to publish a due diligence policy. CSRD, the same thing. With the batteries regulation, there's a due diligence policy, conflict minerals due diligence policy, EU deforestation regulation due diligence policy. You can see where I'm going. This is the first regulation, but this is the first piece that actually spells out a lot more concretely what that policy is. It dedicates articles that are meant to line up with the 5 stages as outlined by the OECD guidance about identification, analyzing, prioritizing, mitigating, etc., and also going further around providing, having proper stakeholder consultation, both designing due diligence and doing due diligence, having proper grievance mechanisms to identify harms and allow impacted people to interact, providing for remedy. So it lays out a lot more concretely what we actually mean when we say due diligence. It's a generally understood concept. And again, to lots of big companies, all of them will have a fairly good idea of what it means. But this actually goes through article by article of what is expected, trying to lay down concretely as possible a translation of soft law into hard law. And to lead to the next point, what's game changing about that is that due diligence has always been understood as human rights due diligence from the UNGPs. The OECD had done a lot to break that up to just more of process, and then you feed in the risks afterwards. This is really a human rights and environmental due diligence file. This is kind of going beyond HRDD to HREDD. And even if you consider there is a requirement in there to have a transition plan, and there's talk in there about climate impact and annex, it can even go further to be kind of a light touch climate due diligence, but it's expanding the concept beyond human rights to be a system that's put in place for whatever your human rights, environmental, even climate risks are. So it really does go that step further than even what had been expected. And for the type of data we look at, human rights due diligence policies are becoming more mainstream. What is not mainstream is environmental due diligence. Think about biodiversity, COP and the commitment there. Very few companies are tackling that. Under this law, they will have to have a due diligence policy in place that they could fit in their nature degradation risks into and try and assess that. So that's the two big things that this does that's on top of what's already there, because this is action. Everything else so far has been built on disclosure. The logic has been, rightly so, the more transparency we have, the more the incentives are to do better. And in general, the more information that's there, more people will take the right decision. But as a very good study that the Commission did with BICL, the British Institute of Comparative Law, before the proposal was made, they basically showed that the current level of voluntary standards on action weren't achieving anything. And so we'd already gone to mandatory reporting. It made sense we went to mandatory action. And this is where the two meet up, really. In an ideal world, just to take CSRD and CSDD, you have CSDD, that is your due diligence, that is your double materiality assessment, that is your identification and prioritization of risks, and that is your action of what you're doing day to day in order to deal with them. And your CSRD is your communication of that. They're obviously not written side by side, but there's obvious overlap. In an ideal scenario, that's how they should interact, and the added value of both. Neither do exactly the same thing, but neither are as strong without the other. And so they come together like that. So, I mean, our view is that in the future, the double materiality assessment and that risk identification and impact assessment in CSRD will be overtaken by CSDD because of how much more prescriptive it is and how the biggest companies are going to adopt it. So there should be a positive spillover effect to the next level of companies. Again, to be seen, but there's a very much inbuilt logic there. And even speaking with some companies, that's kind of how they're just reading the tea leaves for the next 5 or 6 years.